Now, the Hunt Palmer Show.
A magic beyond anything you could ever imagine.
You are now listening to the Hunt Palmer Show. Brought to you by Sagrera Farms on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Locking down the middle of the day.
You really think that's the best idea?
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio, this is Hunt Palmer.
It's quite a piece of work.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Thursday. Means we're brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Jacob Beck, Cassie Spazzali back there on the ones and twos. Plenty to do as we're working towards the weekend. Talk about the Saints coming up in 15 minutes. Bill Barnwell from ESPN ranked the skill groups in the NFL. Where do the Saints come up in that list? PicKell from On3 Sports going to talk some LSU football with us. He's been banging the Brian Kelly LSU drum all off season. Excited to chat with JD at 1:30. At 2 o'clock, segment I do every single year. I'm going to go through LSU's high school baseball signees and tell you what I know and tell you what I think about Sunday and Monday in the draft. It's going to be tough to get deep into that on Monday and Tuesday when the draft settles because we'll be at media days next week. So I'm going to set the table for the draft, and then we'll get to it when we can next week. But obviously a massive 2 days for the LSU baseball program on Sunday and Monday. I'll tell you what I think at 2 o'clock. And then a cool story on ESPN.com. The anticipated arch villains for every top 25 college football team coming up this fall. That's going to be... It's a humorous read, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit as we move forward. So lots and lots to do. But, of course, the headlining is the big news right here out of the capital city. Let's get to it with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's opening drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
We have been talking about Lamar Brown's recruitment heavily for a month. Realistically, for a year, for some multiple years, because of how high profile Brown has become right there at U-High, literally on LSU's campus. And as the months drew on, it kind of whittled down to two teams. And I think that there was a lot of quality reporting in that Brown was strongly considering LSU and Texas A&M until late in the process. And the reasons were obvious. Like for LSU, it's home. It's where your family is. It's where you've grown up. It's the flagship university of your state. It's one of the most tradition-rich programs in college football, and it's Saturday night in Tiger Stadium, and it's Kyle Williams, the defensive line coach, who's been an all-pro on the defensive line, and it's the national championship pedigree, and it's all that. And then for A&M, it's a chance to be remotely close to home, but a little bit further away so you can spread your wings. And it's a massive stadium and a huge alumni base and a head coach that's a big-time defensive line developer and a chance to go make history over there and become part of a championship team, which no one in maroon and white has ever experienced. So there were reasonable sides on both. And we sat here in Baton Rouge, and you're hoping that home wins out, and you sit there in College Station and you're hoping that a chance to spread your wings and do something different wins out. And I think that the indications started to roll in about 10 o'clock this morning that home was going to win out. And Lamar Brown went on ESPN2, and trust me, nobody was knocking on my door from a national television broadcasting standpoint when I was a high school senior. So I can't even imagine going on ESPN. But my guy was nervous. There's no doubt about it. And he was quick to answer questions and really just wanted to get on with the show. And when he got on with the show, he said he would be playing the next 3 or 4 years at Louisiana State University. He put on the huge-sized hat, had the baseball jersey on, which I appreciate, national championship baseball team if you hadn't realized. And he pledged to stay home and play for the LSU Tigers. Now, look, I still toss these caveats in every single time we talk recruiting. I know this doesn't mean he's going to end up at LSU in January. Not mean he's going to end up at LSU next summer. He can still flip. There's plenty of time for that. I know it means LSU's in a really good position to land him, and it's really good news for the football program. I also know that with the transfer portal open, high school recruiting tends to be pushed down a peg in terms of its relevance. But I'll say this. It's really important to get these kinds of players. It just is. Even in the age of NIL, even in the age of the transfer portal, even in the age of signing the number one portal class and filling your roster with a bunch of starters from different places, even in the era where you've got 5 stars in the very recent past that have come to LSU and moved on, like Lance Hurd, for example. It's still important to get these commitments. It's still important to get these signatures. It's important to have Harold Perkins on your roster for 3 years. It's important to have Will Campbell on your roster for 3 years. It's important to have Emory Jones and Trades Green and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and Whit Weeks. And I know I'm kind of all over the board there, but these are big-time recruits, some from in the state, some from out of the state, that you get in and you get 3 or 4 years out of All-American type play. And sometimes that comes from 3-star recruits, but far more often it comes from 5-star recruits. And when you listen to people a lot more qualified than me talk about Lamar Brown, you realize how important it is for LSU to get him in the class. If he were just an offensive lineman, he would be a 5-star. If he were just a defensive lineman, he would be a 5-star. And the fact of the matter is that he is a 6'4", 6'5", 285-pound prospect that is listed as an athlete. That's how dynamic this young man is. Not only is he a 5-star offensive lineman and a 5-star defensive lineman, he is a state champion in the shot put. He is a state champion in the discus. He is as dynamic an athlete as there is in this recruiting cycle. And he goes to school on your campus. And sometimes that's played to LSU's advantage. Nick Brissett, Garrett Brumfield, Jaquelin Roy, like guys, they got in the boat that came to LSU and had very productive careers. Sometimes it's worked against LSU. Dylan Moses, Tim Williams, Jordan Gilbert didn't go to LSU. Came back. So I think most people, if you just zoomed out and you weren't immersed in this thing and you said, well, Ohio State's got a 5-star that goes to school on their campus, well, why would you even recruit that guy? But we know better than that. We know that LSU does have to fight for the U-High kids. And this is one you've got to fight for. And to LSU's credit, they did it. Like, A&M put up a good fight. If I realized fully that if I got on this microphone today and he had picked A&M and I had said, LSU staff did a good job recruiting, there would be pitchforks at the studio door about how stupid a comment that is. But when we can relax and go, oh, well, LSU got this guy, and I can go, A&M ran a damn strong race here. To get a kid from Baton Rouge to take that many visits to College Station, Texas, and up until the very last day, hours before the commitment, for national analysts, LSU analysts, A&M analysts to go, I'm not really sure. That's a hell of a recruiting effort from Texas A&M. You can talk about their player development program, the booster base, the alumni network, clearly NIL, all that stuff's relevant. And LSU's got some of that as well. But LSU had home in their back pocket, and that's a tough one to break free from. Now, you'll hear people talk about the money LSU was able to fundraise here, and in this era, like, certainly 2 months ago, I would have said, yeah, that's like the biggest deal. Like, what happened there? Well, now with the deals where you got to pass them in the clearinghouse and you can still pay high school kids out of collectives, and like, it's a little bit convoluted now in a way that I don't have a perfect handle. And I got a handle on it, not a perfect handle on it. But the fact of the matter is that LSU staff did what they need to do. And I come on here often, and we'll do so in the future, and say, look, you can't lock kids in a trunk and shove them into psychology class and not let them see the light of day until it's time to go to school. Like, you just give your pitch. And whatever the LSU staff did, from a visit perspective, from a development perspective, from an NIL perspective, from a revenue sharing perspective, from a Kyle Williams perspective, like whatever they did, they got it done. And I think oftentimes our reaction to wins on the recruiting trail is, all right, good job. And our reaction to losses on the recruiting trail is, this is a disaster. Fire the coach. Fire the position coach. This is awful. How are we going to recover from this? We'll never. It generally turns up to 11 when you miss a guy, and it's like a 6 when you get one. I prefer to treat the wins as like a 9 and the losses as like a 7. This would have been a big loss. Not one you can't recover from. You can always go to the portal or go try to substitute for the player that you don't get in the recruiting trail. But getting these high-level prospects in the boat is massively, massively important. Wilson Alexander from The Advocate just tweeted out moments ago, said if LSU is able to get Lamar Brown and Tristan Keys, 2 top 10 players in the 24/7 composite in this cycle, it'll be the first time they have done that in years and years and years. And now I'm forgetting the 2 guys he said. I thought I'd just be able to recall it. I want to say Lael Collins and Anthony Johnson, but let me make sure that that's correct because I can pull up Wilson's profile right here. He said it would be the first time. Yep, Lael Collins and Anthony Johnson. I was right. Go back and check it. That's a long time ago. That's the fam, 2011, with Jeremy Hill and Kenny Hilliard, and all those guys that came in that class and were great, great players at LSU. Hopefully Lamar Brown is the next great, great player at LSU, like the guys I rattled off here that were 5 stars that have come into Baton Rouge and made massive waves. So big time for the LSU staff, big time for this class, which now will creep into the top 5 by most of your recruiting services. You're talking about a class that now, according to 1-3 and Rivals, still has the highest average rating per player in this class. You've got Tristan Keys, who's a 5-star, Trenton Henderson, who's a 5-star, Lamar Brown, who's a 5-star. Like, you've got high-end players. And we all know that a lot of times players head out after being massively highly rated. Deshaun Womack, Lance Hurd, Quincy Wiggins. It happens. But you celebrate these wins when you can get them. Big-time win for LSU as they pull in Lamar Brown by ESPN, the number 1 player in the nation from right here in Baton Rouge, and he is committed to stay home right here and sign his letter of intent coming up in December. So big, big get for LSU. We got a lot to do here on this Thursday. We're brought to you by Sagrera Farms Premium Angus Beef. Tell you more about them as we move on in the show because I had one of their steaks this weekend. It's real good. But we'll talk about that as we move forward. When we come back, let's talk about the Saints position group in terms of the skill positions and where that ranks in the National Football League. We'll do it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com. Good day in Baton Rouge, as we just alluded to there in the first segment. How about you make it a better day and go over to Airline at Piku and look around at Genesis vehicles? Most of you listening to me have not gotten behind the wheel of a Genesis. That's just the reality of it. But you can change that. And you don't even have to go to the dealership. I recommend you do. It's a first-class facility, and the staff is wonderful. But if you're thinking, I don't have time to run over there, I'm on the other side of town, busy, got kids, got job. I do have 20 minutes at lunch, though. I'd like to get behind the wheel. Well, tell them. They'll come to you, get one of their brand ambassadors to hop in the car with you, take it for a spin, and see the Genesis difference. It's a luxury vehicle at a reasonable price. When I say Genesis of Baton Rouge, think luxury vehicle. When you think luxury vehicle, don't immediately price yourself out. Go look. Check out the inventory online, genesisofbatonrouge.com. Every new purchase, 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge. Find them online at genesisofbatonrouge.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Haven't noticed this. Our guy JD PicKell from 1-3 Sports, who joins us every week during football season, has really been championing the LSU Tigers in this offseason. We'll talk to him coming up in 15 minutes about why he feels that way and kind of get a primer for SEC Media Days coming up next week. I was reading on ESPN.com earlier today. Bill Barnwell has his annual story up ranking the NFL wide receiver, tight end, and running back groups, so the offensive skill position groups for 2025. So this is not a forecast for the next 4 years or a salary cap situation. This is purely looking at what you did last year, what you got on the books for this year, and what these guys might do in terms of their production this year. And I was actually surprised. I'd kind of forgotten where the Saints fell in this list last year. They were 14th. Oh, sorry, my mistake. I misread. They were 14th 2 years ago. They were last year 25th, which makes some sense. And you're kind of running it back this year with much of the same. You've added Brandon Cooks, obviously, and potentially your running back shuffle is going to look a little bit different behind Kamara. Probably looking at a little bit more from Kentre Miller, but it's basically the same cast of characters, and that is reflected in the grade, which is just one spot up at 24th. And I think that has to do a little bit with Rashid Shaheed, when he was on the field, really emerging as one of the better deep threats, at least in the NFC, if not in the NFL as a whole. I broke this little blurb by Bill Barnwell down into two different pieces. One is he is curious what to do with Chris Olave. He was fourth in ESPN's receiver score, but limited to 6 games and a handful of snaps and 2 others because of the concussions, which, by the way, is now 4 in 3 years, which we know very well. Barnwell calls Olave a legitimate number one receiver when on the field, but it's impossible to form any realistic projection for how often we'll see the 25-year-old this season. To me, with concussions, it's unlikely that Chris Olave loses a step. Like, this is not a second ACL tear or a significant fractured leg or like some sort of deal like Steph Curry or Mahomes where their ankles don't work half the time. Like, this is a guy who physically, in terms of running, jumping, catching, all the things required to do by the NFL receiver, he's still well within his prime. It's just a matter of whether or not his head will cooperate. And that's something we can't really know. It's certainly terrifying. One, as Chris Olave, two, as Saints fans to a much lesser degree, but when you're rooting on the team. But you've drafted this guy in the first round, and he's shown over 2 seasons he's a 1,000-yard receiver if he's healthy. But is he going to be healthy? So to me, you would just grade him as a 1,000-yard receiver. Like, sure, concussions happen frequently, and if you get one, you're more prone to others down the line. But, like, to me, I would look at Chris Olave as a legitimate 1,200-yard receiver in the NFL, given reasonable quarterback play. And that's not a given, but we're not grading the quarterbacks. We're grading the skill guys. So if you give them league average quarterback play, he's going to be a 1,000-yard guy. And then the second piece of this that I find interesting, and these are some statistics that Barnwell dug up. He said, as for Alvin Kamara, it might be time to face reality. He's spent half his career with Drew Brees and half without. And he's been a different running back without an elite passing game to make his life easier. Barnwell writes, though he's still an effective receiver on a per-route basis by running back standards, he's probably miscast as a 3-down back and would be far more effective as the receiving back in a rotation. I think part of that is true. The part that suggests that a running back's life is much easier with Drew Brees under center is very obvious. That doesn't make it less true. It is very obvious. I would suggest if you gave Alvin Kamara Philadelphia's running back and Jalen Hurts, Philadelphia's running back, Philadelphia's offensive line and Jalen Hurts, that he would still be a great 3-down runner. The Saints' offensive line last year was a mash unit. The year before that, it was a mash unit. So, yeah, his productivity has dropped off post-Drew Brees, but so has the offensive line play. So, while I completely understand casting a shade of doubt on Alvin Kamara's future the next 2 years at 30 and 31 years old, I'm not just solely going to pin this on Drew Brees not being there. It hurts. It's not the sole factor. They've got to do a better job on the offensive line of staying healthy and then blocking. And right now, the Saints' offensive line has a chance to be very good. If McCoy is healthy, he's a top 5 center. If Fuaga takes a step from year 1 to year 2, he is at worst a league average right tackle, at best leaning towards a Pro Bowl right tackle. And if Banks is as good as Fuaga was last year, he's at least league average as well. And we think Cesar Ruiz is league average. We'll see what Penning can give him on the other side. But there's at least a chance that the Saints offensive line is good. You could have, it's not out of the question that the Saints have 2 Pro Bowl offensive linemen this year. You would not fall out of your chair if I told you that Eric McCoy made the Pro Bowl. You would not fall out of your chair if I told you Taliesin Fuaga made the Pro Bowl. Would I bet my money on either one of them making the Pro Bowl? No, but they could be that level of player. And Banks, the potential's limitless on him. Certainly, it's better than whatever the Saints were trotting out there in week 8 last year, where you were literally the last 2 years signing guys off the street to go play and start on your offensive line. So I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater with Kamara just because Breeze isn't there. Like, let's look at something else. So to me, I'm not going to ding Olave too hard on injuries that don't impact his ability to play the position. They just impact his ability to get on the field, if that makes sense, right? Like a knee injury can compromise your ability to play wide receiver. A concussion limits your ability to literally get on the field. If he's literally on the field, he's good. And if Kamara gets better blocking, he's good. And Shaheed, in his role, is good. Now, beyond that, I don't know. I didn't like the Cook signing. I don't like the tight end spot great. So I'm not clamoring for Barnwell to move the Saints off the 24th spot here. I think that is completely fair given the circumstances, because it's not a guarantee that Olave plays, and it's not a guarantee that the Saints offensive line is very good for Kamara. But I think some of the nitpicking he's doing here can be pushed back on a little bit. So you see where this puts the Saints in the NFC South. Well, behind the Saints is the Bears, Giants, Jets, Bills, Browns, Patriots, Panthers, and Titans. So only one group here is worse than the Saints. And that brings me kind of back around to Carolina, which I've told you time and time again, I don't want to constantly compare the Saints to their divisional peers because I don't think that's a great barometer when you're looking at what the ultimate goal is, which is competing to win the NFC and to get into the Super Bowl and to win it, which not this year is not going to happen, but that's why you literally form a franchise. So I'm not going to just try to be the tallest short person here. I'm trying to get towards the top of the league, but if we are going to compare them to the Panthers in this vacuum, I will suggest that they are doing things poorly because they're toward the back end of what the Saints are on the front end of, which is surrounding your young quarterback with the best ecosystem possible. And if Bill Barnwell is telling you that the Panthers are 31st in their skill positions around Bryce Young, you're making life hell for Bryce Young, and that's what the Saints have to guard against with Tyler Shough. So you need Olave, who's still in his mid-20s, and Shaheed, who's still in his mid-20s, and then either Neal or Miller at running back to emerge a little bit. And you need that position group to come along. You've spent your resources on the offensive front, and that should be settled here for the time being. Now it's time to be aggressive in the draft, in free agency next year if some money comes available, and go get him the weapons he needs to be successful. I don't know that you have them right now. Bill Barnwell says you're right there at number 24, so that's not a great ecosystem. In year one, that's okay. It's going to be drinking out of a fire hose for Tyler Shough. Like, it just is. It would be easier if he had the Eagles supporting cast, but that's not necessarily the spot that everybody comes into. It would be easier if he had Brock Purdy's San Francisco supporting cast. Not the case for everybody. And Josh Allen's making it work with what Barnwell says is a worse supporting cast than what the Saints have. But if you can keep him upright this year and keep Olave healthy this year, you can be okay. But I think the next piece to the puzzle for Shough is going to get some pieces around him behind that offensive line that make the Saints offense hum a little bit more. So I don't think this is an unfair ranking. I push back on some of the detriments to the Saints here. But ultimately, these guys have got to go out there and play and get it done. Barnwell says they're 24th in offensive skill position playing right this very second. We'll just see. If you're looking for Saints content, you can find it wherever you find your sound. Hunt on Saints. Saints report in just over 2 weeks. So it's about that time to get involved with the Saints. We're talking about LouisianaSports.net. Ross Jackson does an awesome job for us. And again, wherever you find your sound, certainly on YouTube, Hunt on Saints, you can find your Saints coverage. All right, JD PicKell on 3 Sports talking Tigers when we come back.
The Hunt Palmer Show. This is the Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Want to put this on y'all's radar. Make sure you're following 1045 ESPN on Instagram and Twitter, because UFC 318, I like 318, UFC 3F18, coming up next Saturday. That's July the 19th. We're going to be giving away 3 4-packs of VIP passes to the watch party inside the sportsbook at LeBear's Baton Rouge. You'll have a roped-off seating area, catered food, free beer. We're going to be having a big old time a week from Saturday over at LeBear's for Poirier versus Holloway. So if that's something that interests you as a UFC fan, follow us on social media as we move forward. We're going to be giving away those prize packages in the coming days. So check that out on our social media. Let's talk some football. JD PicKell hosted the Hard Count on 3. My guy's got to be chomping at the bit. Football is close enough to taste it. Big 12 Media Days just wrapped up. SEC Media Days cranks up in Atlanta next week. So we got to bring him on. JD, how we doing?
Dude, I'm like Pavlov's dog. Whenever I hear Hunt Palmer on the other side of my telephone, I know that football is about to be played, man. Pleasure to be back on with you. Crazy media is already here, man. It's that time again.
It is. We're excited to hit the road for Atlanta on Sunday. The first thing I'll do for SEC football media days is settle into my hotel on Sunday night and do the Major League Baseball draft and write that. But we'll get into football quickly Monday and Tuesday. I want to do that with you. You kind of been banging the BK drum in the offseason. Why is that, sir?
I'm banging the drum, man. I'm absolutely just taking a drumstick to that thing with every fiber of my being. I think that when you look across the country, everyone's hit on this. A lot of uncertainty at quarterback for a lot of these big dogs for the most part. Like Texas, I think Arch Manning is going to be great. How great is he going to be his first year as a starter? TBD. Ohio State, same thing. So you kind of go down the line here to save us some time of all these, premier institutions. And LSU has the most sure thing in the country at quarterback, paired with, I know folks in Baton Rouge are excited about this, continuity on the staff, plus the number 2 port. So there's so many things from the roster to continuity to Nussmeier, paired with where the rest of college football is right now. I think LSU set up to make a real run at this thing.
Let me play devil's advocate, and that's what I'm doing because I don't necessarily believe everything I'm saying. But let me play devil's advocate. Nussmeier turned the ball over in crucial spots at College Station, crucial spots against Alabama, crucial spots at times against South Carolina as well, and Florida, and isn't very mobile, and he doesn't have that offensive line that kept him upright all of last year. 4 of them are going to the NFL. Like, are you certain Garrett Nussmeier is going to be as effective this year?
The answer is no, I'm not certain, but in a weird way, and roll with me here, in a weird way, I feel better that he's done that already. Like I feel better that he's gone into those spots and knows what it feels like to fail miserably where you're up against Alabama at home and to just flop. I feel better that he's flopped in the second half against A&M because now when he gets back in those spots, maybe he's not, in a spot where he has the extra confidence because he balled out in those spots. But on the flip side of that, there's a certain presence I think you gain knowing what it feels like and then getting to do it again for a second time, kind of getting a do-over. So I think the composure for him will be maybe not night and day, but at the very least improved. And if he has a run game behind him too, I think that'll do wonders. I think Caden Durham, should he stay healthy, knock on wood, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for LSU to be complimentary, which I think is one thing that kind of got overlooked talking about Nuss a year ago, is everyone's talking about he's kind of got this gunslinger to him, and we warned you about that before the season. He likes to take chances, and I'm sure some of that factored in. But we saw it with Carson Beck at Georgia too. There wasn't that premier Georgia run game they're used to having, and you saw Carson Beck start to force things downfield. Kind of the same thing with Nussmeier when his run game was even more inferior to what they had relative to Georgia. So it's a long-winded way to tell you, I think the presence, having done it in the SEC, plus the opportunity to be able to step into a spot with more help is going to be a good thing for him.
Defensively, LSU hasn't been good enough the last 3 years. What gives you the confidence that this is going to make that different?
I think the continuity with Blake Baker, like we talked about a little bit, and I think also the fact that you saw improvement from the year before to the first year with the staff. I think if I'm an LSU fan, and Hunt, you could probably tell me more specifically on this and be more on the nose here. Like, I think if you're looking at your roster, you're like, man, we got some guys here. Like Weeks popped up in a big way. Patrick Payton popping up here via the portal. Harold Perkins. Like there's should he stay healthy? There's a lot of guys here to where if that second year scheme looks like a second year defense with all that talent, there should be enough there for them to have some success on that side of the football. And to be clear here, I don't think LSU needs to be, top 25 in the country defensively to get to where they want to go.
Yeah, I mean, they probably need to be top 60, top 50, and they haven't been near that in the last few years. And they've got to have some of these portal pieces hit on Baker's defense, and it feels like that's a distinct possibility. We'll just have to see. Let's dance around the rest of the Southeastern Conference. I want to do some more national stuff with you as we get into probably August. But around the SEC, I mean, everybody's loving Texas. Are you on that boat too?
I am, but I think I'm loving them for different reasons. Like, I think the take that people are falling in love with now, whether it's subconsciously or consciously for traffic, is, well, hey, you got Arch Manning, and he can't be worse than Quinn Ewers, right? And I think that's probably a fair way to look at it in some respects. I just like Texas because of what else they have around Arch Manning. Like, I think what they've done on the defensive side, the way that Sark has recruited and stockpiled talent, especially up front with Simmons and Anthony Hill, like, I think Texas is in a spot to where if Arch is just okay, like if Arch is mid outside of the Ohio State game, Texas, I think, will be good enough from a pure talent perspective and a toughness perspective on the defensive side to probably be a college football playoff team yet again, and I think compete for an SEC championship yet again.
Ole Miss doesn't really have the expectations they had last year. Do you feel like that's a good thing? And are you ready to just plug Austin Simmons in and he'll do exactly what all Lane Kiffin's other quarterbacks did?
To answer the second part of that first, yeah, okay. I'm really big on Austin Simmons, which it's July, so I think it's fair for us to be high on a lot of these teams and be a little bit expectant. But I can't get out of my mind that drive against Georgia. And going back and watching it this offseason, I think the situation that they walked into in that spot was really fascinating. Like, wet game, kind of gross. At that point now, with Jackson Dart out, it was a team that was down by 7 to Georgia with all their talent on that side of the football. And Lane Kiffin goes out, and I think he calls 4 or 5 passes for Austin Simmons. And they weren't just like dink and dunk. It was like 20-yard completion downfield. It's timing route here. Like, it was a lot of stuff where it's like, hey, if you don't feel good about your quarterback in that spot against Georgia, already down 7, you just kind of ease him into it, run the football. Austin Simmons is 15 years old, and he's already graduated college. Like, there's a lot there with that drive to make me feel really excited if Lane Kiffin's feeling that excited about him. But to answer your question on a bigger scale around Ole Miss as a whole, I think we're at this point now where it's fair for us to trust the way that Lane Kiffin builds his roster, which is kind of what we said around Florida State last year, so famous last words. But I really do believe that they have made it their identity to go through the portal. Like, they're going to evaluate at a high level. Clearly, they're going to close at a high level with a lot of guys they've brought in. So I think that if it were anybody else, it'd be more concerning. But with Lane Kiffin doing it however many times in a row now, with the kind of volume they take via the portal, I think we can trust it. They'll once again be a factor in the SEC. Probably not the same talent potential there. Like, you don't feel as good as you felt about Walter Nolan and all those guys up front, but I still think Ole Miss is at the very least going to ruin somebody's chances in November to go play for an SEC title.
Alabama has not been interesting in July in 15 years. They're now interesting. I'm very fascinated to see what people in Atlanta have to say about them next week. What do you have to say about them today? I
think that they are a quarterback away. And I say quarterback, I think they are like a true plus at quarterback away from being a team that could win a national championship. I think you kind of got lost in the sauce a little bit that they were a top 10 defense last year, which was really my biggest question coming into the year. Is like, Kane Womack, I think he's a good coach, but this is Alabama. That's a different standard. They lost a lot via the portal and rolled out there with a couple of freshmen at corner. And found a way to win at a high enough level last year to at least be in that playoff conversation. My biggest thing too, in addition to the defensive side and the quarterback, is all the games Alabama lost outside of Tennessee were just total take your eye off the ball games. It wasn't like Alabama isn't more talented than Vanderbilt or isn't more talented than that Oklahoma team. Like, I think all of the change for Alabama last year, they were just so unsettled. Everyone who's still in that locker room now in Tuscaloosa is committed to Kalen DeBoer. I think if you were there a year ago this time, you were committed to Alabama and that logo and willing to take a shot on Kalen DeBoer. But if you're still there right now, you are bought into the Kalen DeBoer way of doing things. And I think that level of settled will account for some of those weird toe-stubbing moments against those lesser competition teams and have them right there in that mix to be a team that plays for a national championship. And if they get out of that gauntlet as the SEC, they'll be in that mix, I'm confident.
JD PicKell is our guest from 1-3 Sports, host of The Hard Count. Going to have to give us a little bit of time here talking some football. South Carolina came out of nowhere last year. People expect things from them this year. Do you expect things from them this year?
I expect so much of Lenore Sellers. I think if you were to check stock in Lenore Sellers, it would all be gone because I think I've bought the majority of it. I've stockpiled all of it at my house right now, and I'm excited for it to boom here in the fall. I am really, really curious to see what they look like on the defensive side without Kennard now, because I think that helped Dylan Stewart a lot a year ago, where you had to double one of those guys, and if you did, the other guy got after you. But if they're just okay enough on the defensive side, I think Lenore Sellers is good enough to where he can account for those games where there is a talent gap. Like, is South Carolina the most talented team in college football? Absolutely not. Are they a top-tier talent team in the SEC? I wouldn't say that either. But I think in those spots where you just get inside of striking distance, I think 16 is good enough to take the game over. And that's like vintage, I think, talking season sort of take. But I've felt this way, I think, since the Clemson game last year, where he just put him on his back and said, no, we're going to win this thing. I don't care who they have on defense.
He'll be in Tiger Stadium with the Gamecocks coming up early in the season in the fall. So we're looking forward to all of that. You going to be in Atlanta next week by any chance?
We'll be there. We'll be there, brother.
We will see you there. Looking very much forward to it. So take care, safe travels, and we'll see you in Atlanta.
Likewise, Hunt. Hey, love you, buddy. We'll have a great one. We'll see you soon.
He's JD PicKell, host of The Hard Count on 3 Sports. Guys, fired up for a little bit of football. Sagrera Farms brings you our shows on Thursday. Sean came to Foodie Friday over on Talk 107.3, our sister station, and cooked burgers and steaks for us back in the summer last year. And I tasted the quality of the beef and could certainly speak to it then. He dropped off some beef in my house last week, and I was able to get some on the grill this weekend. And I cooked a bone-in ribeye, and it was unbelievable. The tenderness, the it's just incredible, the difference when you can tell you're tasting a quality steak. I've given you the numbers in the IMF scores and how prime this beef is, but I can speak to it from experience at my house on my grill last weekend, and it is phenomenal. So I highly, highly recommend you give my guy Sean a phone call. It's 719-1723. Get your side, get your whole cow, get your freezer full of ground beef, ribeyes, chuck roasts, skirt steaks, flank steaks, whatever the case may be that you're looking for, he's got it. And so you can always have unbelievable quality beef at your house when you're ready to get something on the grill. Football season's around the corner. If you're hosting some folks and want to put steaks on the grill, these are the steaks you want to have. It is a hidden gem right here in our area, 30 miles away at Sagrera Farms. Give Sean a call, 719-1723. He gives you our Thursday shows each and every week here on the Hunt Palmer Show. We'll come back and close out hour number 1 with some Saints talk next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show, brought to you by Sagrera Farms.
Closing up the hour with some Saints talk here. CBS Sports has a list, the NFL's all-quarter century offensive team. And if you look at the Saints, like, your options there are probably Drew Brees and Jari Evans are probably your two guys that have a chance to make it. And Drew Brees did not, as you would imagine. Tom Brady was the starter at quarterback. I'm not here to argue that. Peyton Manning was the reserve. I'm not here to argue that. Patrick Mahomes, reserve. I'm not really here to argue that either. Breeze and Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger got honorable mention. And it made me think, like, I'm not here to argue Breeze's case against Peyton Manning or Patrick Mahomes, but I am here to suggest that, like, if a couple things break differently, that are so obvious. Like, is this discussion different? Because, like, can you point to a massive controversial loss in the playoffs for Peyton Manning or for Aaron Rodgers? Like, I struggle to. I can't really, even with Mahomes. And for Breeze to have the Nola no call like you did, and to have the ridiculous play in Minnesota like you did, and if those two change and he's got 2 Super Bowls, plays in 3, like, he dwarfs some of these other guys. Like, he's not even in the discussion with Aaron Rodgers if he does that. I feel like we just kind of default to, well, Manning, Brady, and Mahomes, like, Super Bowls, they just got it done. But, like, Breeze led the NFL in passing yards 7 times, completions 6 times, touchdowns 4 times, 2 times Offensive Player of the Year. He was an All-Pro. He never won an MVP, and that's disappointing. But I feel like his legacy is cemented as the greatest player in Saints history and an all-time great quarterback, yes. But it changes so drastically if things out of his control don't happen. And that's a difficult one to swallow as you look back. Like, still, as Saints supporters, like, you understand it was a golden era and you look back on it so fondly now, certainly knowing what preceded it and what has followed it, it even elevates Breeze to another level here in New Orleans. But I feel like when people pull up Drew Brees' Pro Football Reference page and just look at the numbers, you'll see how great some things are, but you won't see the Nola no call there. You won't see the Minneapolis Miracle or whatever we're calling that. And those are out of his control. I mean, I could even go to, beast mode, or could go to what happened with Vernon Davis in San Francisco that weren't really in his control in those games. All of those plays are made while the other team has the football. And so I wonder if Breeze had gotten and won 2 Super Bowls, maybe even won 3 Super Bowls, and you put his numbers up against Mahomes, who statistically doesn't necessarily throw for as many yards or completions as everybody. They just win a lot. He does for a ton of yards. He's great. He's an all-time great. But that's really built on the postseason success that he's had. And Breeze's failures in the postseason weren't really his fault. And I think that when you go look at all quarter-century teams like this, and you look at Breeze's legacy, which he will ultimately be compared to Rodgers and Roethlisberger and Rivers and Manning, Eli Manning, and those of his time, and will be dwarfed by Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, and now Patrick Mahomes, I don't know if it's really his fault that that's happened. And we knew that at the time, but it just is exacerbated when you look back at things like this. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's in the top 3 all-time in yards, touchdowns, and completion percentage, and he's second behind Brady in yards, completions, and touchdowns. I think he's hurt by not having an MVP, okay, and he's hurt worse, in my opinion, by the fact that those postseason games ended as bitterly as they did. And that's why he's not put on these teams more regularly. Those of us that sat there and watched him, man, was it a treat. And it was different for me, because for those of you that are diehard fans, like, you got to watch him do it for your team. For me, it was great. I went to the Dome. I probably saw Breeze play in person 7 times. And just to go and watch him perform surgery on a defense was such a treat. And I think he may be a little bit underappreciated because of what happened in those fateful Januaries. Not by Saints fans, by those on the outside. But still, first ballot Hall of Famer, all-time great statistically, and the greatest player in the history of a franchise, which certainly means a lot. So I know Drew Brees means a lot to the folks down here in South Louisiana, and they're longing for the next one to come around. Come on, Tyler Shook. That's it for the Saints talk here in hour number 1. We're going to pause, take a timeout, come back, and I'm going to do a deep dive on LSU baseball signing class for Sunday and Monday's draft. If that's your thing, lock us in after national headlines. The next segment, The Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
One Bath and Closets. OneBathandClosets.com is that website. Those of you that moved back during the pandemic, got such an incredible interest rate, and you're thinking now at this point, it's 4 or 5 years later, and you're going, man, I can't move. Our interest rate's so good, but I'd really like to spruce things up around here. I got your guy, David Duvall, One Bath and Closets. Brand new closet, customized to your specifications. He can do it. Tub to shower conversion in the bathroom, something simple, not the time-consuming or invasive. He can do it. Full bathroom renovation with the shower and the floors and the vanity and the mirrors. He can do it. You make one phone call. Don't just call the handyman down the street. Call somebody with a certified master plumber. Bonded, insured, 30 years of experience. They'll customize it to your specifications. It's One Bath and Closets. You can find them online, and pictures are great work at onebathandclosets.com. It's onebathandclosets.com.